Inicia ya.
Muy buenos días desde Quito, Ecuador.
Good morning, all the way from Quito, Ecuador, headquarters of the Latin American Energy Organization, OLADE. Welcome, distinguished authorities and representatives from the energy sector of the region. For logistical purposes, do note that we have live interpretation into English, Spanish, and Portuguese. If you want to access these options, please make sure that you click on the interpretation icon located at the bottom of your screens. Over there, you will be able to choose a language of your preference. On behalf of the OLADE and the IDB, please be most welcome to the 6th Energy Week. We also want to thank our sponsors in main media and strategic partners. We will begin Roundtable 1 on integration for energy integration. We will now hear the welcome speech from the Executive Secretary of OLADE, Alfonso Blanco, engineer, and Marcelino Madrigal, head of the energy division of the IDB. Go ahead, Alfonso. Good morning, everyone. It is a true pleasure to begin this important panel for the Energy Week. A warm welcome also to Marcelino Madrigal, interim head of the energy division of the IDB. Also welcome Jesus Tejea, senior specialist of the energy division of the IDB, and welcome to the entirety of the IDB team. To begin with this panel, I simply want to highlight some elements. First of all, we know that integration is necessary for the LAC region. It is necessary to have energy integration because our energy systems are in transition, moving towards more participatory systems that have a more penetration of renewable set of sources that do not necessarily have the capacity of being managed. So having more integrated systems, having more dynamic markets, to have energy exchanges is a need for the LAC region. Along those lines, we know that we have different levels of progress within integration in the region. And we need to try to look ahead in the long term towards having an energy market that is as integrated as possible. And that is why at the level of all of our agencies, we are working to make this vision of a more integrated LAC region a reality. The benefits of integration, of course, are manifold. Integration allows us to have a more secure supply. Integration also allows us to have more efficient energy systems. And integration also allows us to better plan within our energy sector so that investments and the use and allotment of resources from our economies is as efficient as possible as well. This is why we are facing a significant challenge ahead for integration, because we do require markets that operate dynamically and that allow not just for exchanges between countries, but also for us to have markets where electricity exchanges go across the borders at the regional level. So that is the vision that we have, and that is our goal for the region. But of course, we are dealing with many challenges for integration. Integration is not something that has been recently included in our agendas, because historically in the development of the energy sector in the LAC region, we have been focusing on integration, but we also need to value the progress that we've been making towards integration. We know that the hydroelectrical offer for integration comes from binational projects. And in a way, this is integrated into the energy offer of the LAC region. And we do have a history of success in that type of exchanges. We also need to bear in mind that energy systems at the historical level have always provided support for countries in crisis across the region. And that is something to note and to consider as we move forward with the energy integration of the region. We know that in times of crisis and hardship and issues with the supply, neighboring systems have provided support for countries in crisis. So we have proven that energy integration is key for the safety of the supply of our countries. But of course, we have a very long road ahead of us. We have many obstacles still to overcome to have energy systems that are as dynamic and integrated as possible. But I still want to note the importance of remembering that integration is not an option. It is a need in order to provide efficiency and better operation conditions to our energy systems. So having said that, welcome on behalf of the OLADE. It is a pleasure to have so many integration platforms gathered here today. As you know, it is always a true pleasure to work in cooperation with the IDB. And Marcelino, I now yield the floor to you to also give a welcoming speech. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful discussion today to try to progress with integration. Thank you, Alfonso, and thank you to all of my colleagues from OLADE and to all the authorities that are joining us here today. It is a true joy and a pleasure to be part of this panel that we considered to be so important. As you know, energy integration, as Alfonso was saying, has been going through multiple stages. It started in the 70s and 80s with big hydro energy projects in the region that also went hand in hand with the expansion and electrification of the region. Also, we saw the progress in many technologies and more scalable plants in the region, and we started exploring binational connections in Central America and in the Andean region, in the Southern Cone. We started bringing in more technologies in order to make the best out of the complementarity of thermal and water resources. But then at the beginning of this decade, we started going through deeper transformation processes that enabled us to accelerate the energy transition across the region, but through market and financial agreements and by bringing in the participation of the private sector and not just of the public sector, we saw a great acceleration in the transition. This is a case of Central America, where we're seeing many agents selling electricity in more than 6 countries. And these regional electricity commerce platforms require, apart from infrastructure, they require regulations and agreements. And even if the region is facing multiple challenges, we have clear examples of success for the world. Many times, our colleagues across the region are sought after by other countries in the world to share their experience of integration. But we now are facing the need to decarbonize the electrical sector, including new technologies such as solar, wind, and hydropower. So that gives an added value to energy transitions and integrations. We need to have a deeper integration. We need to accelerate and deepen the penetration of renewables. And we also need to focus on the goals from the RELAC initiatives to achieve a penetration of 70% of renewables in the region. Now, we know that regional integration helps us have more flexible electrical systems that are able to deal with a great amount of renewables. And if we see the countries in the region that practically are in a mix of 100% renewables, we know that those systems are very flexible, but they also have a great deal of connections and integration with other countries that enable them to deal with these new technologies. So there is an added value for energy integration. We know that the IEA estimates that in order to become carbon neutral in the energy system across the world, we need to quickly accelerate the way in which we invest in transition from about 200 billion per year all the way to 800 billion. So we need to triple the way in which we're investing in the transmission of energy across the region. And transmission, of course, is a rather low cost segment of the value chain, but however, it is the most valuable. And that is why in the bank, we are providing support for all the energy processes across the region. We are collaborating with the Central American region, with the Andean region, with the Southern region as well. So we have a clear vision and a clear and a clear assurance that having a more integrated, decarbonized sector is a possibility and can be a low-cost sector if we deepen the energy integration. So having said that, welcome to this panel that will provide us with a very broad perspective and outlook of where we stand in the integration processes across the region. Having said this, I want to yield the floor to Tiago Guilherme Ferreira, who is the Director of Energy Planning in the Ministry of Mining and Energy from Brazil, and my colleague Jesus Tejeda, who will be moderating the remainder of the panel. So without further ado, please be most welcome to this session that is of the utmost importance for us. Tiago and Jesus, please go ahead and coordinate the session. Good morning, everyone, and I wish you the most success for today. We can hear you, Theo. Go ahead. We will now be dealing with the integration of 6 electrical markets in Central America under the electro-regional market through the electrical interconnection system for the Central American countries. The CEPEC is an electrical transition system that is unique for the region, and it spans out in 1,800 kilometers, and it has been in operation since 2014. Currently, the CEPEC and all of its regional organizations are undergoing a consolidation process that benefits from the increase in the growth of the electricity that is being exchanged. To tell us more about this now, we will hear Arturo Alarcón, who is a senior energy specialist from the IGB, who is currently working in Panama. Arturo will also be telling us about the expansion of the electrical Central American expansion towards the south that also has the support of the IDB group. Go ahead, Arturo. Thank you. Good morning, Tiago. Thank you to Olade for inviting us to share this presentation with you. I will be sharing my screen with you now. I have two very brief presentations to share with you about the Central American integration initiatives. The first one is Central America, Colombia, and Panama. The first one is CIEPAC. This is an electrical interconnection system for the countries of Central America that covers 6 countries. We're talking about over 5,000 square kilometers and over 50 million inhabitants. This is the third economy of the region, and it has 18 gigawatts of capacity that have been installed and are in expansion. The CIEPAC integration process, as was initially mentioned, started out sometime in the 70s with binational connections. The first one actually was between Honduras and Nicaragua in 1976, and these binational connections started expanding. But in general, the operational capacity was of about 50 megawatts between the countries, and there was a limited exchange of energy. By 2002, we had countries that were connected, but through binational connections. And that's when this idea of creating a regional market that overlaps with the 6 regional markets came to be, and to connect all the networks through the physical structure of CIEPAC. This started to be implemented in 2010. And we finished with the construction of this system in 2014. And at the same time, we were developing this physical structure. We were creating the necessary regulations for the institutions in the regional electrical market that would enable us to have a higher amount of energy exchange. And now we are exchanging 300 megawatts between the countries. So the result of implementing the CIEPAC and of implementing this network for over 40 years is to have a physical structure on the one hand, but also to create regional institutions. We have a regional regulator. We also have a company that is the proprietor of the network. We also have a regional regulations for the market. And as we can see from the moment this system came to be, the exchange of energy within the CIEPAC now represents over 6% of the regional demand.
Obviously, this has been affected by the pandemic, and the exchanges have lowered to, in 2018, but we expect them to recover. In March, we had the peak in 2020, just before the pandemic. Another result that we've seen as well as a result of this integration process, apart from the regional transactions, is the creation and surgence of different market agents. There we have a list that is more updated. We have 307 agents that are participating in the market, mainly generators, but also transmitters and different traders. We have a very dynamic market where there are many agents, most of them private, and that are using the infrastructure and the rules to commercialize energy. We have calculated the net benefits of integration, and this considers what are the benefits of having the energy exchange integrated versus the one where each country were not connected. Those benefits, if we take apart the costs, are more than $400 million. If we consider that all of the infrastructure was $500 million, and these are the benefits of the last 6 years, we can see that it is profitable, the integration is profitable, and it also has environmental benefits in order to optimize renewable energies. Another benefit that we've seen is the convergence of prices. There you can see that there's a drop in prices that is also related to the drop in fuel prices, in fossil fuels. But I think that in all of the countries, they are reaching a similar point. They're converging, and that means that resources are being used in an optimal way. in all the countries. Ideally, the prices in an ideal market would have to be the same. Which are the challenges for CEPAC? The first one is to consolidate the capacity of the first circuit. The first one was designed to allow for 300 megawatts to be exchanged between countries, but it is connected physically with the local networks. So local networks have to expand according to their expansion plans in order to maintain that capacity. It's necessary to reinforce the internal networks of the countries. We also have foreseen the creation of a second circuit that would enhance the capability and which would also enhance and grow the amount of technology, of energy that is used. We also have to consolidate the regional institutionality, which means continuing with the rules, the harmonization of rules, the planification, also establishing long-term contracts and regional contests. This is a way where we can be able to have lower prices and have these advantages in a regional office for the users. We have a third challenge in Central America, which is that the fees are above the rest of LAC region, and that's why it's necessary to continue to work on the diversification of matrix to try to achieve lower prices and use that to share the resources and to share backup. If we think about different markets, such as, for example, auxiliary services. I'm talking about integration towards the north with Mexico and to the south with Colombia. The IDB supports CEPAC almost from the beginning. We've financed the technical cooperation resources, and also provided loans, and we continue to support the process. It's one of the projects, I would say, where it has been involved for the longest and that we're most proud of. There in the presentation, we can see some of the things that are being supported now. For example, analyzing feasibility of the second circuit, updating these operational security criteria for extra-regional interconnections, supporting regional contest mechanisms, etc. The key point here is that we are working directly with regional institutions and we continue to support them, thinking about taking the regional energy market to the next step. The second point is the Colombia-Panama interconnection. This is a project that the bank has also been supporting from the start, by mid-2000s. And we think that we could achieve eventually an integration from Mexico to Argentina. CEPAC and has been connected already. Guatemala is connected with Mexico. Colombia is connected with its neighboring countries. And we've seen that it's also advancing towards a regional energy market. There is a microphone that hasn't been muted. The interconnection project for Colombia-Panama interconnects both countries. Sorry, there is a microphone that is not muted. Thank you. It's a project of 500 kilometers that interconnects Panama until Cerro Matoso. It's a complex project from the infrastructure standpoint that has taken a long time to define a route that is sustainable environmentally and that minimizes the environmental and social impact. It has been determined that it should have a sea area of 130 kilometers and that it should have a continuous high voltage connection. where is that project? Like every infrastructure project, it has different stages. It had an initial definition stage and of alternatives where the environmental corridor was defined, where it's going to be built, then the technology that is going to be used, the specification of the marine cable, that's already defined. Now we are advancing with the environmental impact study in the different areas of the project. And also we are working on the harmonization of regulations in both countries. We are awaiting for the environmental studies by next year, and in 2023 would be the beginning of the construction. This would allow to connect the Central America area with the Andean region. There was a presidential agreement in 2019 to provide backup for this project. And it's been talked about with the indigenous communities of Panama, and those communities were part of the agreement to determine the route so that we can go forward. This year, we also had a ministry agreement between Panama and Colombia that aims to define the rules and the framework in which the project is going to be implemented. What are the next steps? First, of course, finishing the technical and environmental studies to finish the different parts of the project. And then we would have to go ahead with the C area of the project, with the C section. Then we would also have to obtain the authorizations and the different environmental licenses, and also review the scheme of the project and all of that. The bank is also supporting part of these challenges with an economical evaluation of the project that will allow us to inform how the project can be financed, since there can be different ways with public-private capital, different schemes or risk schemes. We are also working on the environmental studies for the first section, and with the financing structure with the IDV Invest. We are also doing the financing of the rural energy part, and that's one of the agreements that we reached. That if the interconnection, the binational connection will be done, but the area will also be supported. This is just a quick view of these projects. We, of course, could talk more about them, but given the time that we have, I think that it's a good summary. And I would also like to mention that these are key projects. SEPAC, as an example of what can be done, what can be achieved, and Colombia-Panama is a milestone that will allow to integrate the whole region eventually. Thank you. Thank you, Arturo. So talking about the importance that is talked about in the strategic studies, how can we show the relevance of it in the development of Central America? What is required for the infrastructure of SEPAC to generate significant change in the region in the mid and long term? Related to the first question, the IDB conducted a study in 2019 that is on the website that evaluates what are the benefits of SEPAC in Central America, and it was calculated that the benefit of having integration versus not having it is 0.3% or $500 million per year in the region. But we also saw that if we continue working towards integration, it could reach 1 billion per year. And those are benefits, especially because of having lower energy costs, but also due to the investments and having a higher productivity. What is required to really improve this integration? The first thing is to maintain the current connectivity. It's important to maintain those 300 megawatts and to strengthen the networks in each country. Second step, I think that is key, is to continue to advance with a higher integration. We're talking about long-term actions that allow for longer contracts where we can have better prices. And the last thing would be to advance towards harmonization of the regulations to be able to coordinate the region and the national areas in order to reach common ground. Thank you again, Arturo. It's expected for the binational connectivity between Panama and Colombia to allow for integration of the Central America and Andean region. What are the challenges in the future to make sure this connectivity happens, and eventually to have these areas connected, the Andean and Central America areas? Well, we expect for the interconnection of the Colombia-Panama regions, which would be a first step to connect those two countries. We expect that to give way to the connection of the two markets, the CEPAC market and the other one. This will require creation of rules between the countries to see how that would work. But I think that it's important to mention, because the line between Colombia and Panama is already underway with the procedures to connect to CEPAC. It already has the authorization, the regional authorization, and it's working on the one from the Commission. Another key thing is that ISA, which is the company in Colombia for the connectivity, is also part of CEPAC and is also part of the connectivity between Colombia and Panama. So I think that there are many interests that are aligned regarding integration in the region for all of the countries to benefit.
Now, looking to the challenges that are ahead, we have the challenge of this big infrastructure project to keep the most relevant environmental standards as well. We also have regulation challenges pertaining to agreements between countries that would allow for the projects to be funded and viable. Thank you, Arturo. I also want to share a few comments, and going back to what Alfonso Blanco mentioned about the importance of regional electrical integration. I want to mention the strategic role of international interconnections by the lines between Argentina and Uruguay that are playing a major role in the management of hydro resources in Brazil. Just to get a picture of this, we are undergoing the worst hydric crisis in Brazil in the last 100 years, and the interconnections with Argentina and Brazil have provided the support necessary for Brazil to better manage its regional energy resources. That's what I wanted to mention. Thank you. Thank you, Theo. Thank you, dear Tiago, and thank you, Arturo, for your participation. Your message, Tiago, is very clear with regards to the incredible need for generation in Brazil and how interconnections are playing a vital role in order to provide the continuity for the electrical service. Having said that, I want to go to Mr. Edgardo Calderon, the Executive Secretary for the Board of Directors of the Regional Electricity Market of Central America. Edgardo, the floor is yours. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes, loud and clear. It is a true pleasure to be participating in this panel with you today. I want to tell you a bit about the Andean market today. And for that, let us begin with Diego Recero so he can share with us a vision of the Andean integration. And then afterwards, I will go to Alejandra Blanes so she can tell us about the development of the Andean market in the short term. And then I will go to Jose Ramon Gomez, who can tell us more about the Ecuador-Peru interconnection project, which is a major project for the development of this market. So go ahead, Diego. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Edgardo, for this opportunity. I want to first greet all the attendees, especially Alfonso Blanco and Marcelino Madrigal, on behalf of the OLADE and the IGB. It is a true pleasure and a true honor to be participating in this Energy Week organized by the OLADE and the INGB. And it's also a joy to be sharing this morning with such distinguished panelists. Now, about the vision that we have in the Andean community on the electrical interconnection, I would like to very briefly mention about how we have been able to articulate actions between our countries to foster energy integration. As you know, one of the mechanisms proposed by the Cartagena Agreement in order to achieve Andean integration is to get a full physical integration of the Andean territory. But for that, we need to consolidate and strengthen the physical infrastructure of each of our member states, and also to have interconnected regional systems. In these lines of technical and analysis discussions, we have brought together the regulators in the CDMER that has the representatives from the normative and regulators from our countries. These entities actually create proposals for the progress of the harmonization of the regulations necessary for the full integration of the sub-regional integration of electrical systems and for the intercommunal exchange of electricity. Within this forum, we have regulators from Bolivia, Ecuador, and Peru. Complementary to this, the CINEA, as of 2011, has defined as one of its main goals the use of mechanisms to provide legal security and guarantees for the development of infrastructure and for the international transactions and exchanges of energy. Also, we want to create an electrical energy corridor within our countries and across our borders. We also want to move forward with specific bilateral agreements that can define financial and commercial mechanisms for the exchange of electricity. And within that context, we are now going through a new consolidation stage for the energy integration of our region that began in 2017 by the creation of a new regulations that creates the short-term Andean regional integration market that provides for the creation of a transitory system. And this also refers back to another regulation. And this will be enforced until we have a new regulation created. Through the enactment of this new regulations for the regional integration of electrical systems and for the intercommunal exchange of electricity, the member countries have pulled their efforts in order to analyze and develop proposals for the drafting of 3 regulations. One is an operational, one is commercial, and one is for the regional coordinator, and this will enable us to regulate the different international exchanges of energy. The Indian Community Secretariat will try to get these regulations approved through the resolutions created by the CAM Secretariat. So from the enactment of these regulations, our countries are focusing on analyzing and developing proposals for these regulations that will allow us to have a fully operational regulation that will allow for international electricity exchanges. Our countries are now reviewing the 3 regulations, and we foresee that they will approve these regulations in the short term. I do want to note the importance of the actions conducted within the framework of the CINEA. Those actions are articulated with the actions from the PRANDEL, bearing in mind that the Andean community is providing the necessary support for these actions to be in operation. We have a framework that it has been harmonized thanks to the support and the help of the IDB. We were given the necessary technical and financial aid for all of the stages of this regional project. And as a part of the process of drafting the regulations for the 816, we are trying to focus on actions that will enable us to get the help from the IDB in order to get a functioning regional operator for the regional community. But for that, of course, we need to have the country that is coordinating the operator, which is Colombia, and the other country for the regulator, which is Ecuador, in order to ensure the continuity of these projects. Right now, we are clear on the fact that one of the key aspects and the key factors for the economical recovery in the context of the post-pandemic is to pool our efforts for the strengthening of our regional integration. And because of this, the quick implementation of the Andean market needs to be leveraged by the countries as a means for reactivation, energy efficiency, use of excess resources, among other benefits, of course. Finally, I would like to point out that the interconnection of the electrical systems of our member countries and the intercommunal exchange of electricity is one of the tools necessary for the consolidation and strengthening of our physical infrastructure in the member countries, and of course to achieve interconnected regional systems, so providing economical, social, environmental benefits that might enable us to optimize the use of energy resources and improve the reliability and safety of the energy supply. So that's it for me, but if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. Thank you. Thank you, Diego, for your comments. Let us now move to Alexandra Blanes, so she can tell us more about the development of the new system. Thank you, Edgardo. I will share a brief presentation with you about the CINEA integration process, about where we are standing over there, and about the next steps ahead. We can see your screen, Alejandra. As Diego was mentioning, decision CAN 816 that was approved in 2017 establishes the principles for the regional electrical Andean market, the main rules for the Andean market in the short term, what will be the functions of the regional coordinator, and establishes the need to create operational and commercial regulations for the working of this market. It also establishes the main principles for the functioning of this market. We are trying to optimize the use of excess of resources. We also want to leverage the complementarity and the availability of energy resources. We want to provide a free, transparent, and reciprocal access to information, and for all information that might be necessary in order to conduct international business. We want to foster the economical progress of the Indian region. We want to sustainably use resources at the environmental level. And we want to establish the sovereign right of countries in order to establish criteria that might enable them to use their national resources in a sustainable way. And with regards to the rules of the short-term Andean market, we know that there is no obligation to export energy for security reasons or when the generation of energy is not sufficient. We also do not want to affect the prices of the exporting country. The other regulation is that all international transactions of electricity that are binding to be conducted, the exporting country will receive payment for the use of its transmission system, and the excess market should be divided equally. In Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, we have seen the development of the regulations for the operation of this market. First, we have the operational regulation that defines the operation conditions that will rule the sales and purchase exchanges. Then we have the commercial regulations that defines the conditions and the procedures for the liquidation, invoicing, and payment of the TIE. And lastly, we have the regional coordination regulation that will appoint a regulator, its features and responsibilities. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Are you sharing your screen properly? Because we can see your comments on the side, you know? Okay, give me a second. Yeah, just go to presentation. Yeah, this is presentation.
No, we see the notes there. So let's take this away. Can you see it properly now? We see it, but not on presentation mode. Just a second.
Y la vuelvo a poner.
So I'll put it back on. Let me know when you can see it. Can you see it now? Yes, okay, now it's perfect. So when we talk about the functions of the regional coordinator, the first thing is that this is something that is done by the operators of the three countries. We have the different organizations in Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador. This role of a regional coordinator will be something that rotates, and the different operators of the system will have this. With the regional coordinator, it will be 2-year period, starting with Colombia. The third thing is the main roles of this regional coordinator. The first is to create and adjust the economical office, to coordinate the technical operation of the international links, to register and determine the compensation and liquidate the TIEs, also using the unitary toll, and giving the system operators all the necessary things for the market. Now, since Colombia is starting with the role of the regional coordinator role, they have been working on developing the technological platform, which is something that the regional coordinator has to do. These platforms, there are some general principles that have been established with Peru and Ecuador, which include the quality and trustworthiness principles, also usability, efficiency, ability to be maintained, and portability. The idea is for this solution to be oriented, for this to be 100% on the cloud with Microsoft services. And the idea is for this platform to be able to be transferred very easily to the country or entity that becomes the regional coordinator. Furthermore, what Chile and Bolivia come into play, they will also be able on other time to use the platform for international transactions very easily. Also, they have the responsibilities on the one hand, the coordinator and the regional administrators or operators. What are the main responsibilities of the commercial and operative rules? In the operative part of the responsibilities, we have maintaining and providing the regional coordinator the required information for the economical office, providing and registering the regional database, and inform the regional coordinator about news related to operation and maintenance. And regarding the responsibilities of the local providers, they have to provide means of communication that are trustworthy to send information to the database that is administered by the regional coordinator, communicating to the regional coordinator readings of the reading system in the frontier node, and providing information to the regional coordinator of the activities on compensation, commercial measures and such. This is also last year, at the end of 2020, the countries of the system approved the roadmap from 2020 to 2030, and this roadmap that is divided into two big components. What is looked for, and component one is to move forward as fast as possible. This means, as Diego said before, that the rules of the CAN decision have to be approved by the CAN. The internal norms have to be adequate for each in each country with the CAN norms. Then we also have to move forward with the structure and the implementation of the market of short-term energy, the MERC. Then we also have the second component, which is the development of infrastructure of SINEA, We have one part that is related to the project that is more advanced, which is the Ecuador-Peru interconnection in 500 kV, and also move forward with the studies that are necessary for the Peru-Chile interconnection in 500 kV to move forward. The countries also identified several studies that are key for the interconnections, studies for the Peru-Chile interconnection, also updating the study of interconnection for Peru and Bolivia, also a possible second interconnection between Colombia and Ecuador. And lastly, also a study of alternatives for interconnection between Bolivia and Chile. What is sought with this? What are the expected results with the interconnection? For the first component, it's for the MAERCP to start functioning and to move forward with the short-term part. And the second component is to try to have an increase in the volume of the transactions between the countries of the CINEA and increasing the volume of the transactions nationally. Regarding impacts, we expect that greenhouse gases are reduced, are avoided. There's going to be a reduction in the fees for energy and an increase in revenue from energy sale. What would be the next steps to finish? First, the adoption of the rules, which is now first in Canrel, and then they would be adopted by the CAN according to the different schedules of the countries. We expect that by the end of this year. As mentioned, the second thing is that the three countries, should be able to start to adapt their internal norms to the CAN decision. Colombia already has assistance underway for that in view of the rules of the CAN. In Peru, it's already in process too. They're already hiring the different assistants that will help them with that. And Ecuador already has them defined and is trying to see who is going to support them with this process. The third thing is that we have to establish the regional coordinator, which, as I said, the first one is going to be Colombia through XM. XM has already been working on this process internally, and they are looking for financing to continue with establishing the regional coordinator. The IDB, on their part, is also looking for funding to support the development of this platform, of this technological platform that is going to work to carry out transactions in the short term in the Andean market. And lastly, it's important to move forward with building the infrastructure. Here, the priority is the interconnection of Ecuador-Peru that is going to be presented in a few minutes, and also moving forward with the studies of interconnections for Peru-Chile with 220 kilovolts. And we are also going to work on the study for interconnection between Peru and Chile. Thank you very much. And I'm going to have Jose now speak. Jose Ramon, thank you, Alejandra. Jose Ramon, it's your turn to talk about interconnection of Peru. Hello, good morning, everyone. First, I would like to thank you. Of course, the organizers are my colleagues of the bank. I am here in Quito, but I'm going to tell you something. What's behind this interconnection program between Peru and Ecuador? Of course, it's the strengthening of the electrical interconnection by developing a kilovolt structure. The idea is to increment the interconnections between Ecuador and Peru, and that will then extend to other countries, which is quite complementary. Something that we can see in this geography is that Ecuador is in the middle of the Andean community, and the trustworthiness of the electrical system allows for them to operate. There are 3 lines of transmission with a double circuit, and there is one of 138, and they are quite active. It's a total capacity of 500 megawatts. And there is also a simple circuit that has an exchange capability of 100 megawatts. Ecuador was very important in energy exchange until recently, and there is an expansion of energy in the country, and different things implied a lot of investments in this technology. In 2016, Ecuador reverted the balance and became a country that exports mainly towards Colombia, and with the different regulatory schemes that are being used. With Peru, it's also permanent. It's great. It really dynamizes the market. The Andean market makes it more dynamic. In 2018, the system had a 63% capability that was hydroelectric. On the other hand, in Peru, the highest demand came to 13,000 megawatts, which corresponded to electricity and renewables. What we also see is that there are things that have a low capability, and some countries are complementary, but there is really room for using the different capabilities of the country. But given the low capability for transmission between the countries, in, for example, 100 megawatts, when we could be 17,000, and considering the different networks, we see that there is a huge chance for advancement and to strengthen the market, the regional market.
In 2014, as Alexandra was mentioning, the CENIA adopted its first roadmap, identifying 3 stages for market implementation. First, to consolidate bilateral transactions, to establish a regional market through the harmonization of the regional regulations and a full functioning of the Andean energy market. But however, if this X-ray was created in 2014, we have already heard what progress we've made and what lays ahead in this roadmap. From the INGB, we funded a series of studies for the electrical interconnection, and in general terms, we see a concrete progress in binational interconnections. And I do want to provide data, updated data for this program. We have 636 kilometers of transmission line at 500 kilowatts. It starts in the Rodriguez Huachaqui substations and gets all the way to the La Nina substation in Peru. The maximum transmission potency is of 500 kilowatts. So this is a significant interconnection. In Ecuador, we have a section of 111 kilometers and then 74 kilometers from the Pasaje substation all the way to the Peruvian border. In the Peruvian section, we have a section that is divided between 2 substations, and we have an extension of the La Niña substations that reads all the way up to the Peruvian border. And the payment for this extension will be done by the private sector. But for the Peruvian side, the investment will be made by public agencies together with the IDB. And we think that in this operation, we will be increasing the number of transactions, and we will be guaranteeing the provision of electricity. We know that Peru has a good penetration of renewables with a low hydraulic capacity, but a high level of generation in winter. So the energy mix has a high penetration of natural sources. Now, in this project, in Peru, as a matter of fact, last week, we decided the location of a new substation, which was important because once that was defined, we would be able to move into the tender stage for the project. And in Ecuador, we have come across certain peculiarities, especially with the drafting of social and environmental assessments. We also know that this touches on the economic impact as well of the project. And in the past 6 months, with our support and with the support of other agencies, we have been able to create a map that pleases everyone. And in Peru, we are working both with public and private agencies to move forward with the program. And additionally to what Alexandra Zinnia mentioned, at the physical level, we needed to define details in Peru and in Ecuador. And we think that in the next 2 to 3 months, we will make concrete progress in the definition of the project and to come to a definitive program, because we have an initial stage for the program, but we faced several challenges. So we might be a bit delayed. We don't think that this will take years, though. But as we all know, integration programs are complex. They come with many challenges, but we have solid groundwork to have a strong program that will enable Ecuador to be, in a way, a bridge between Colombia, Ecuador, Chile, and the rest of the South. So that's the information that we have for this program. Thank you again for inviting me, and I hope that this information was valuable. Thank you, Jose Ramon, for the details about the progress of these structures. I'm afraid that we are running out of time because the next panel starts in 15 minutes. So I just want you to very briefly make some comments, and then I will be asking you a couple of questions about these presentations that I believe were very clear. What I noticed in all of your presentations is that you have recognized that the electrical integration process is a continuous process that goes through several stages. And I am pleased to see that you're moving away from bilateral interconnections to lead into a full regional market integration process. And of course, these regional markets have their own characteristics. They face their own challenges for integration and for infrastructure building as well. So I did want to ask you something about what you all mentioned about the CAN resolution, because the CAN resolution provides the need to establish principles. So all the work that you do is based on the principles that countries can and want to come into an agreement about integration. So about those principles, I wanted to ask you whether or not, apart from considering the internal market, you are considering, and this is a question for Diego, the possibility of interacting with other regional markets. Because at one point, after stabilizing the regional market that you want to build, it might be possible to interconnect and then trade energy with these markets too? Thank you for the question. Yes. We start from a political will from the Andean countries to create this electrical interconnection first between our markets, and then to work together in bilateral initiatives, which we are now transitioning, and then at a later stage to then seek integration based on the different capacities of all the countries to achieve this interconnection. In the mid and long term, we want to interconnect with other markets, such as the Central American market and the Southern market. So we are making a joint effort. The work here is not just a regulatory work, but we're also focusing on the infrastructure necessary. And we are focusing on getting all the resources necessary for this infrastructure. So in the long term, of course, we are trying to achieve this energy integration in the entirety of Latin America. And as members of the CAN, we see that there's a capacity for this. We have energy stock and we have capacities, and I think it's safe to say that we are exporting countries and we can fulfill the needs of other markets as well. So in the mid and long term, we want to get to third-party markets and to strengthen the regional integration as well. Thank you. A quick question for Alexandra. I've noticed that you have been working tirelessly in the technical regulations and operational and commercial and coordinating regulations in the short term, but as we are always mentioning, we aspire to leverage another driving force, which is to increase generation jointly. And of course, this has to be done in the long term. In Central America, we have this ambition, this tireless ambition to project ourselves in the long term. So I wanted to know if you in the mayor have looked towards preparing so that in the future, this short-term work that you are doing might be expanded or developed in the long term. Yes, Edgardo, our roadmap for 2020-2030, which the senior ministers approved in December 2020. I'm so sorry. I don't know why my video is not working. So as I was saying, the 2020-2030 roadmap has a clear schedule. And what we want is that as of 2025, we might be able to start focusing on long-term integration conditions of these CENIA countries to then start working on long-term transactions. So yes, the member countries are considering this. Initially, from here on to 2025, we will be focusing on a short-term market, but then afterwards, we will start working on long-term transactions between the countries of the CENIA. Thank you for that. And lastly, Jose Ramon, we see the ambition of these countries, and of course that you will require strong funding, and you will need to be creative in the way in which you handle investments across the countries. And as you remember here, the CEPAC, we did this whole complex operation of providing funding for countries. And I do understand that the IDB is also analyzing this so as to provide support for nations in order to implement these giant projects. Thank you for your question, Carlos. You know how complex this process is, of course. And in this case, I think that the Andean electrical system is rather specific. In the Colombian case, we're getting private funding, and that's working quite well. Colombia has been consolidating and expanding its transmission system. In the Peruvian case, we also have a similar example as well. As a matter of fact, last week we were analyzing the requirements for funding requirements and what activities were underway. And what we are seeing right now is that we do not believe that we will find any challenges in these integration processes, at least for the funding from the Peruvian side. In the Chilean case, we know that they're doing significant extension works. They actually got a tender for $3 billion. In the case of Ecuador, there has been an investment of approximately $10 billion in the last 10 years. That included transmission and expansion and generation as well. And all of this investment has come from the public sector. And in the last Ecuador Open for Business Forum, what we were able to see last week is that Ecuador is providing good ways to and feasible ways to attract private investment. And Ecuador started a process a couple of months ago to start conducting building a transmission line in the northern region of the country with private investment. And in the forum, we saw that there was significant interest from the private sector to participate in this project. At the regional level, we would like to focus on the integration using public investments, but we want to know what the central government will define. We know that these interconnection programs should be funded by the public agencies, especially bearing in mind how exchanges work in the short term. So we think that we will keep seeing this investment coming from the public sector. But another thing that we find is that right now the markets have more liquidity, the systems are more robust, and there is ample experience in the Andean sector to attract private investment. So we don't think that this will be a challenge. This will be an opportunity to continue strengthening systems. And as Marcelo Madrigal was saying, electric transmission will be vital for the decarbonation of the energy sector and for the energy transition. So we hope to see more infrastructure, more integration, and more participation from both the public and the private sector in order to strengthen these systems. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I want to go now to Jesus or Marcelino so that they can wrap up the panel.
Thank you very much for the moderation of this section of CINEA and also to all the panelists. I will now welcome the Vice Minister of Energy of Colombia, Mr. Miguel Otero, who will help us moderate the session that is in the framework of the CISUB. Go ahead. Well, thank you very much, Jesus. For me, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here moderating this session, especially for the interests of Colombia. It is a leader, a very important leader in terms of regional integration, not only of energy, but also of interconnections. In this segment, we will talk about the effort to intensify the energy exchanges in the countries of the South. All this within the framework of the CISUR, which is the umbrella of collaboration that has been there since the end of 2018 between Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, and Uruguay in order to use better the great electric infrastructure that we have nowadays. Currently, we can say that nowadays Brazil, with the presidency of the CISUR and the IDB, has undertaken the technical secretariat to talk about the infrastructure of the CISUR for greater exchanges, according to the studies that have been conducted recently. So we have Carlos Echevarria, who is a specialist and a leader in energy in the IDB, currently in Brazil. And then we will also have the participation of Guillermo Coutujian, who is the coordinator of integration of the EOLAE, who will talk about the integration of norms that could make us achieve the objective of greater exchange in the market in an easier way. So with this introduction, Carlos, you have the floor now. We would like to listen to you talk about these points. Thank you very much, Vice Minister. It's been a pleasure to be with you here today with all of you. I would first like to thank Olade for the opportunity to talk about this initiative. If you allow me, I will make a brief introduction. And I'm going to show you a presentation and I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see it. We don't see it yet, Carlos. Okay, there. Can you see it now? Yes, go ahead, Carlos. We're seeing your screen. Okay, thank you very much. So, as the Vice Minister of Energy of Colombia said, the CIESUR initiative started due to a proposal of the IDB and OLADE in December of 2018 in the Energy Week that is celebrated in Uruguay. The initiative has the participation of 5 countries of the South: Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, and Uruguay. And we also have as participants the IDB, which is the Technical Secretariat, and other agencies such as OLADE, CIER, and the CAF. The objective is to move forward in the process of energy integration of the countries of the South using the infrastructure that already exists between the countries and developing new investments that allow to enhance that capability of exchange. The aim of the initiatives is to increment the energy security using the complementarity of their resources, and also to move forward in regulatory and operative agreements that allow us to enhance this, always respecting the different needs and different situations of the countries. All of this doing it in a respectful way towards the environment and taking into account the challenges of climate change. As you can see here, since 2018, as we said, we've had in these years 6 roundtables in which we've been able to continue working with the different activities. The most recent one was in August of this year, which was virtual due to the pandemic, and it was coordinated by the Chile delegation. The activities that we've had have had the support and technical support and financing support of the IDB. In that sense, the IDB approved a technical cooperation that is aimed mostly towards developing 2 studies. The first one is to create an evaluation of the energy interconnections that already exist. And another one is aimed towards analyzing the legal framework and the institutional and normative one regarding the exchange of energy between the countries that are participating in the initiative. As I said, I am now going to refer to the work that has been done on the existing infrastructure for interconnection. Among the main activities that we've had in this study, we would like to highlight first what we've seen exists already between the countries, the most relevant infrastructures, and we've gathered information on their characteristics and specifications. We also conducted an analysis especially in 2018 and 2019. There was an analysis of the exchanges in a period of 6 years, and those exchanges internationally and what happened in those links, and evaluating what was the use that was done of those nodes and the potential for use. As you can see, in 2019, due to the juncture that happened that year, there was an increase, a significant increase in the energy flow towards Argentina from the neighboring countries, particularly from Uruguay and Brazil. And the exchanges diminished from Paraguay to Argentina and Brazil. In the main conclusions that we arrived to with the analysis and the studies, I would like to really highlight 4 of them. The fact that the countries have different resources for energy generation. The prices for opportunity are different, and the ways to organize the activities of the energy sector, and also the perspectives on that. These differences, as we know, the ones that have been working on integration for years now, it's from those differences that we get to the exchange and integration in the region. The countries have shown a will to use those differences and to take advantage of that. The countries with their neighboring countries have been sharing resources and installing different plans, also facilitating different ways to exchange between the countries. In the study, we can see that, except in the case of the binational use of energy, in general, the energy nodes have been used in a limited way. And therefore, we have to take into account that these exchange nodes could have a higher potential. So one of the main conclusions that we should highlight of the study is the great potential that we have now to increase the connectivity between the countries, the CSUR initiative, using the already existing infrastructure. Also, as a result of the study, we have identified many opportunities and things that are complementary, that affect the countries, all the countries, and some of them that also impact binationally. Here, I've allowed myself to put some of these elements, the most relevant ones for you as reference. We have the general ones that affect all of the countries of the region, and then we have, on the one hand, the optimization of the existing infrastructure. We have availability of excellence that can be exchanged, and we have to exploit the things that are complementary in the energy systems. We should also take advantage of the opportunities of exchange with third countries and move forward with creating different international interconnections, and to enable the transit country figure that already exists according to different needs. As I said, we've also identified for each of the national links more opportunities and things that are complementary: Argentina, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and the rest of the countries. I'm available, of course, if you have any questions or if you want further information on the initiative. Here we have the detailed results of the studies and the potential that it has. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Carlos, for the excellent perspective that you've shown us. We will have the opportunity to ask some questions in order to deepen this topic. So we'll have Guillermo now, who is the coordinator of integration of OLADE, and we'll talk about the legal and normative framework that will allow us to continue with these changes. So, Guillermo, thank you very much, Vice Minister, for the moderation, the presentation. Thank you to all the panelists. Carlos was talking about infrastructure and the studies of infrastructure that were done by OLADE, the IDB on infrastructure. And I'm going to talk specifically about a study that was done together with the IDB on the regulatory framework in CIESUR. I'm going to try to be brief since we don't have that much time, but I will try to talk about two main things. One is some findings that we saw when we conducted the study, and also some conclusions and recommendations of the CIESUR member countries in order to move forward in integration. First, the findings. One of the things that we noticed is that all of the countries of the South, the 5 countries that are part of CIESUR, have directives of energy policies that express the will for energy links to be expanded between the countries. That's something that is important. But we also see that the planning in the energy sector in these countries is based on self-sufficiency, energy self-sufficiency. So if they're thinking about self-sufficiency more, the exchanges that are left are more like chance exchanges or emergency cases. And it's always based on excedents and surplus of energy. We also see the prospective scenarios of the countries in terms of energy. They do take into account exchange with their neighboring countries. We do see that there is a will for integration politically, and from the regulation point of view, we haven't seen many obstacles of this nature that wouldn't allow for the energy exchange and trade between countries to be expanded. But some things do have to be reinforced. And one of the things that we noticed is that between the countries, there are different kinds of international instruments. We have treaties, memorandums, different private agreements. There are a lot of different kinds of instruments that that look for these exchanges. We also notice that there are some permanent spaces for integration. I can give you a specific name, for example, the Convention of Energy Interconnection between Argentina and Uruguay, that, and whether they are bilateral or multilateral exchanges, work better. In places where we don't have those permanent exchanges, maybe we should go deeper into that. And the second part, what is the conclusion for this that comes from the study? It's that all of these countries in the South can be able to formalize these prospective energy exchange scenarios and to incorporate energy trade internationally and to share information, because sometimes information sharing is not fluid.
Another point is that this variety of international instruments for exchanges need to be ratified through international treaties. That is, they need to have the political weight through treaties, and that gives more safety in order for the regulation and legal instruments to be applied in the way in which they were written and thought out. Also, in possible bilateral, multilateral integration opportunities, we do perceive that they tend not to work in the way that they should. And sometimes when they do work, we have a broader possibility to manage exchanges. Another thing that we have analyzed, as is the case for Brazil, is that they have national regulations that promote the exportation of electrical energy. So we would perhaps like to include these legal instruments within bilateral, multilateral agreements in order to provide a more stable framework for the exchanges. So this does not just come from the self-determination of one country, but this is something consensual. Another important point is that we need to take these very abstract matters into more concrete actions. In the short term, as a matter of fact, we would like to have a technical and economical analysis of the possible sale of electrical energy between countries that are not neighbors. We actually suggested countries the possibility of moving towards an electrical connection study between, for example, Paraguay and Chile, using Argentina and its electrical system as a transit country to see what the benefits might be. Finally, another relevant aspect for the energy transitions and for the minding of the environment is for us to try for all of our excess of non-manageable renewables such as wind and sun to quickly place them in other markets. So if we have a market that is saturated, to take that excess into other markets, thus reducing the cost of generation and mitigate emissions. Because of time, I will stop here, but if you have any questions, I can go in depth. Thank you. Thank you, Guillermo, for your comments and for sharing such a key outlook. Now, I think we can go into detail with some questions. Based on the comments of Guillermo and of Carlos, one of the things we see as a main goal that guides the agenda of CIESUR is to get the most benefit possible from the existing infrastructure in order to motivate these exchanges. It is very clear and very evident that there have been investments placed in these countries in order to really facilitate these exchanges. And we see an evolution of regulations in order to deal with these market challenges. So this is a question for Carlos now. I would like you to tell me, because initially you mentioned what you did in order to actualize this initiative, but I would like to hear more about the development agenda for the CIESUR looking ahead, and how does that agenda leverage the possibility of exchanges, and whether or not we have a measurement for the increase in exchanges. Thank you, Vice Minister, for your question. Pertaining to the potential for exchange in the infrastructure assessment that we carried out, we started specifying the use of that infrastructure across the past 6 years. We also included the potential and the technical capacity of that infrastructure for exchanges. And per node, we identify the use of the node and what's the potential of that node. So those things have been identified within the assessment. And just to share data with you, in the past 6 years, we have been able to verify that the percentage, not of use, but of the exchange of electrical energy in CIESUR countries with regards to their individual demand is approximately in 4.6%, so that's below 5%. Arturo was explaining that based on the analysis from Central America, in the case of CIEPAC, the exchanges are reaching figures of over 6% of the regional demand. So if we start considering the possibilities of using this infrastructure, we identify a regional potential for these southern countries to increase their exchanges in order to provide coverage for the electrical demand. Now, pertaining to the benefits derived from these exchanges, the the head of planning for Brazil already mentioned this, is that we have undergone crisis, and amidst the crisis, countries tend to become more aware of the significance and the importance of integration and exchanges with countries. We have seen this in the past, obviously, and Brazil has already mentioned the issues that they have been having because of the water crisis and how they have been able to deal with that crisis thanks to the support of the energy exchange with neighboring countries in order to cover the demand. And that is why it is so important, not just in times of crisis, but also in general, to collaborate in order to deal with issues in quality and in performance, in order to have a more robust energy system and to have a more secure energy system across the region. Thank you, Carlos, for those ideas that you were sharing with us. Now, I would also like to ask Guillermo about the relationship between integration and energy transitions, because Guillermo mentioned some of the challenges for the exchanges of energy, especially in countries that are not neighboring countries. So I would like Guillermo for you to tell us what is the main challenge that you anticipate for the development of this agenda in order to boost exchanges. And of course, how does this topic of the increase in interconnections align with the commitments that each of your countries has in the area of reducing emissions? Thank you, Vice Minister. Pertaining to what you were asking about how we can align these exchanges with the environmental challenges that we face, in this region, we are moving towards more renewability. We know that in Paraguay, for example, the majority of the mix is renewable. Chile has a high penetration of solar energy. Argentina is including wind and sun. Uruguay, most of the time, gets to 100% renewable between Salto Grande and the wind farms. So the idea is for the excess of this energy to be sold across the region to help the entirety of the region to move away from the use of fossil fuels, thus mitigating emissions. But another challenge that we have come across is how to promote electrical infrastructure further. Another strength of this region that the minister mentioned, especially in the case of the Paraná and Uruguay rivers shared by 4 of the 5 countries of Ciasur, is that there are many electrical connections. We have about 20,000 gigawatts among the electrical lines, but in a study that we have been conducted in Olade, that we will be sharing with our colleagues in the IDB later on, what we've noticed is that looking towards the future, there is an increasing potential to multiply these exchanges. Just in general terms, Paraguay can multiply from now on to 2025 its exports by 5. Chile can do that by 6. Uruguay can triple its investments. And that means that there is room to increase international commerce, but the bottleneck, of course, is the infrastructure. And lastly, something that I mentioned, but that it's worth noting, is that we need to have political will to back up these projects. The political will of our countries is important so that if we deal with any issues, the integration process remains steadfast, because this is a process that we have been fighting for the last few decades, and we need to maintain it. Thank you. Thank you, Guillermo. I finally want to wrap this up. by asking Carlos about the IGB and how do you visualize the next steps ahead, especially bearing in mind the significant challenges that Guillermo mentioned. Perfect, Vice Minister. I think one of the most ambitious agendas is the 2021-2022 agenda. We are now the pro-temporary presidents. Brazil are the presidents, and we have very relevant challenges for these next 2 years. The first thing is that we are carrying out an impact assessment for the volatility of the exchange rates on transactions and how those exchange rates have an impact on the transactions conducted between the countries. Another relevant aspect to consider that we have been working on and we continue working on is the development of a roadmap for the next years in CIESUR for 2022-2032 in order for us to set goals not just for the use of infrastructures, but also for the possible adjustments in regulations and operations that would allow us to increase the amount of exchanges and energy transactions among the countries. Two other relevant aspects to consider is the aspect of governance. We are trying to develop a governance scheme that might be used both in technical and political discussions that might be necessary to move forward with the integration. So I think that those are the most relevant aspects that we are dealing with and that we will be dealing with in the next few years. Thank you, Vice Minister. Thank you, Carlos. I think having said this, we can wrap up this panel. I think that you have raised very interesting issues. First of all, you mentioned that all the countries across the region are completely willing to continue with the integration process. Carlos and Guillermo also mentioned that it is fundamental for us to continue using the existing infrastructure. And we also need to align our work on infrastructure and integration with the challenges that we face for the energy transition of these countries. And of course, a fundamental aspect that Carlos brought up is the need to align our regulations and our governance. There are many things to bear in mind. We have experiences and examples from which to learn here in Latin America, and we can share the experiences of the different integration mechanisms of the Andean countries that are valuable for us. So without anything else to say, I want to thank the IGB, Olade, Guillermo, and Carlos for participating in this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister, for your words and your participation in this very important session of the countries of the South. Before we have our Olade colleagues speak, I would like to thank the participation of our three distinguished panelists, Thiago Ferreira as a representative of CIESUR, Edgardo Calderón as an executive representative of Central America, and Miguel Otero, the Vice Minister, for his participation. I would like to thank all of the members of the IDB and Olade. I would also like to recognize Diego Caicedo, who is part of the General Secretariat of the Andean community, for giving us some time to participate in CINEA. And I will now have our colleagues of CINEA speak. Olade speak. Thank you very much, and have a very good week. Thank you very much, Jesus, and the rest of our participants in this panel on infrastructure of energy sector. We'll now have the second table on gas integration. We thank the audience that has been connected until now. We will come back briefly in a few minutes with that panel.
Bienvenidos nuevamente, retomamos el contacto y vamos.
Welcome back. We will continue now with the second roundtable on gas integration. Now the moderator will be Raúl Bartera, who will now request to activate his microphone and camera to begin the same. Thank you. Thank you very much, Olade. It's an honor for me to be the moderator in this session that we'll begin with soon. I will now make a brief introduction of the topic. I want to also introduce our panelists, Franklin Molina, the Minister of Hydrocarbons and Energy of the state of Bolivia. He is a senior economist and a specialist in energy development. He studied economics in the University of Santa Cruz. He also postgraduate degrees, also administration, and has been participating in the public sector because he was also the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Hydrocarbons and Energy. Has also been a chief of the regulation and fiscalization of telecommunications and transport, and was also the Minister of Hydrocarbon in 2020. That was when it started. We also have Marco Barbosa Fidelis, who is the manager of the energy section of Brazil. He also a Master of Sciences and is a specialist in regularization of the energy. Also has a lot of experience with economic models related to the transport of natural gas and important contributions to the reform of natural gas. We also have Rodrigo Acosta Serran of ADI, who's an analyst of foreign commerce and is currently chief of the Department of Physical and Digital Integration of, with its house in Montevideo. He has worked with commercial defense, origin regimes, and topics related to infrastructure, transport, and logistics. He also has a master's degree in international relations from the University of San Diego, and also a degree of the Getulio Vargas University of Brasilia. And lastly have Paulo Faragut, who is an expert economist in energy and climate, in sustainable transitions, and has more than 12 years in the energy sector. Has also been an assistant in on climate for the government of Uruguay, has been working for many years for Arpel, the regional company of gas and fuel energies, mainly managing international cooperation projects on energy and sustainability. So we have governmental representatives from institutions related with integration and the company sector as well, on transitions and sustainable development. All of them to talk about a topic which is gas integration, which many of you probably are wondering why now that we're having the energy transition, that we're working towards renewable energies. But in my opinion, it's because of that, to accelerate the energy transition, to incorporate the gas factor, the enormous amount of energy that is under the ground in our countries, to broaden the possibilities of renewable energies. We all know that renewables, LEC and solar, will not be all day the same. Hydraulic energy, we now see what are the difficulties that it could have with long-term climate changes. Incorporating the gas sector will be able to give us ease in those transitions, to be able to broaden them to and allowing for electrons to flow much more freely in the regional market and international market. I'd like to now have Franklin Molina speak, the Minister of the State of Bolivia. And I have these questions for him. Is it possible to carry out the energy transition without natural gas? Let's think about the huge volumes of energy that we have to replace currently. And is there space in the region for a market of regional gas? So please, Franklin, if you are available for these questions. Sorry, Raul, I'm Guillermo. The minister is connecting still, if you want to move on with the other delegates. So I would like to ask Marco Antonio Barbosa Fidelis, who is an expert in law and regulation topics, to see which are the types of changes that are needed to move forward with a gas market, if he agrees that there is this opportunity for natural gas in the region.
From the Minister of Mines and Energy of Brazil. I think yes, there is plenty of room for more integration on natural gas in the countries of Latin America. And I think the main drivers in this integration will be the harmonization of the rules and operational procedures in between the countries. Okay, improvement in the interconnection agreements, and simplification of taxes. A part of the increasing of the infrastructure that will be necessary to link these countries, because in Brazil we have a great connection with Bolivia, that we are importers of natural gas, but we need more infrastructure in other countries to really get a regional market. A part of that, maybe we also need improvements on the internal markets of the countries. You see, Brazil is in the middle of a great reform of his internal market, and we expect to establishment a liquid natural gas market, okay, fostering the supply side competition, and get various players, inclusive non-government players like private companies, to invest, and to have a liquid market, because our market with our former regulation was too centered in Petrobras, the state-controlled company, and we expect to attract investment of private companies, international companies, and to establish a liquid market so we can trade at transparent prices in Brazil, and that maybe it's current our main objective and challenging, but we think that regional integration is very important to add more sources of natural gas at affordable prices to increase this market liquidity.
Muchas gracias, Marco Antonio.
Thank you very much, Marco Antonio. This idea is very good, that we need a rational market and more stakeholders that allow us to create balance for the market and increase the exchanges. I've been told that we have the Vice Minister of Bolivia now, Mr. Franklin Molina, who I will now ask to talk about these questions. If it's possible to carry out an energetic transition with all of the great needs that this means without natural gas, and if there is room in the region for a market of natural gas. So, dear Franklin, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, all the panelists, and everyone who is present in this very important forum for the region, where energy integration not only plays a very strategic part, but also is an important vehicle for energy transition. Definitely, the regional market of the South is a very important market in terms of energy infrastructure. We have, I think, two important markets, Brazil and Argentina, which are the vectors of both demand and production in the region. In the last decade, I think that it's important to mention, if we don't take into account COVID so much, but there's been an expansion, an economical expansion in Latin America, and this has brought along with it an energy expansion. In the 70s, this expansion was definitely focused mainly in gas interconnections. We include Bolivia as an important producer in the region and an exporter during many years. And that growth, together with economical development of the region during more than a decade, having a moderate growth of 2% according to the CEPAL, allowed for that logic to create a growth in terms of infrastructure. As a country, we have important gas ducts that connect Bolivia with other markets. And if we look to the future, there are perspectives of growth and demand.
In this context, the challenges for our regional energy systems, of course, become more relevant, mostly because this growth goes definitely hand in hand with a provision that might guarantee growth. And we also need to focus on the increase in distribution and in the provision of the services connected to gas. And I'm talking specifically about the services that would allow for the electrical provision, especially for those populations that do not have that service. And at the same time, we are trying to mitigate the effects of the emission of greenhouse effects in order to mitigate climate change. Which is why I was saying that transition into gas will also be significant for the energy transition in general. Gas will allow our region to come into a significant opportunity because our countries have the infrastructure necessary to use it on the Argentinian side, the connections of the gas pipeline connect all the way to countries such as Chile. And additionally, the agreements that our countries have signed for regional coordination allow us to think that in the future, this integration will not just happen between important markets, but they will also include countries such as Paraguay and Peru. We actually entered into an agreement with our brother country for the development of gas networks. And we think that this will be a paramount impact for the region, which is why, of course, we believe that it is necessary to create and articulate an integration process. Now, with regards to the complementarity with the energy system, we know that gas represents that, and it is possible for us to discuss this and analyze this. Now, I believe that this panel will allow us to discuss these aspects, but also talk about the challenges that lay ahead for the creation of work tables and work groups that I think have been paralyzed in the past few years because of political and geopolitical interests across the region. I remember we worked with the UNASUR in roundtables, but however, in the past few years, that work was paralyzed. So I think that the mechanisms provided by the OLADE will signify a platform for us to consolidate the energy transition. Thank you, Vice Minister. Thank you for reminding us that there is a gas infrastructure, that there are gas pipelines connecting Argentina to Chile to Paraguay, connecting Brazil to Bolivia, that currently Argentina is finishing a gas pipeline that will reach to Bolivia and to Paraguay as well. I think the groundwork is ready, and we might be able to connect different parts of the region. And this is a significant opportunity, of course. Together with OLADE and the IDB, we will be able to make the best out of these possibilities. And I now want to ask Rodrigo Acosta Serran, what might be the role of regional and sub-regional integration agencies in the gas and energy integration process? Thank you, Dr. Bertero. Before we get started, good afternoon, everyone. It is a joy to greet all of you who are participating in this important event. On behalf of Secretary Sergio Abrero, we would like to thank Mr. Alfonso Blanco regarding the role that integration organizations might have in gas and energy integration. I would say that the general vision is that these organizations might be facilitators for the integration by providing the necessary agreements to reach the objectives of our countries. And in order, of course, to have discussions, share assessments, and boost cooperation. That is why we need to establish actions and mechanisms for joint cooperations, carry out initiatives, programs, and projects. And because of that, the ELADI and the OLADE entered into an MOU this August 2021. And this covers multiple areas such as energy integration, energy development, energy transitions, energy and environment, among other areas. As members of the Integration Latin American Association, we recognize the significance of the energy sector for the regional integration processes. And along those lines, we believe it's necessary to generate actions that will foster energy integration between countries. Historically, the expansion and the strengthening of integration has been considered by the association as a main pillar of the economic and social development of countries. Ever since the 1990s and all the way to the present, energy agreements undersigned by member states from OLADE in the light of the Montevideo Treaty from 1980 have been mainly about energy integration, electrical energy. And over here, we also cover gas energy. A multiplicity of agreements have been entered into between Argentina and Chile, Bolivia and Brazil, Bolivia and Paraguay. These agreements also include countries that do not necessarily include member states from the association. So we have agreements between Mexico with Guatemala and El Salvador for the commercialization of gas. We also have oil, energy, and we also have topics pertaining to generation, exportation, and trade of energy as well. All of this information, of course, needs to be included within the agreements. And going back to your question, I think our agencies can strongly support this integration. That is only possible if there is a strong political commitment of all the countries of the region, and if the countries and the stakeholders from the energy sector participate. We need everyone on the table. And that is why the ALADI, as well as the OLADE, I think can provide support by offering a structure of agreements available from the association. I would say that that's my answer. Thank you, Rodrigo. I would like to now welcome Pablo Ferragut and ask him about the gas integration and whether or not we should focus on that or whether we should focus only on electricity. What are the benefits of combining gas with renewables, and whether or not using blended natural gas, and what's the possibility of it replacing other fuels? Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you to the OLADE for inviting Arpel to be part of this panel. And thank you to all the attendees and panelists. I would say that without a shadow of a doubt, gas integration has room for growth. And gas as a source of energy, of course, can accompany the process of developing renewables. When we look at the energy mixes of the entirety of Latin America, but now focused on the southern cone, even if there's a great development of renewables in the region, and considering that Uruguay is a country that has progressed the most, we also see progress in Chile, in Brazil, in Argentina, albeit a bit slower than in the rest of the countries. We know that renewables require support. They are variable. And in the long term, when we think about more renewable energy mixes with a changing weather, we know that this will be very important, as is the case of Brazil, for example, and Chile with their droughts. So, for example, in mixes that are so based on hydraulic energy, that hits them considerably. We have been moving forward, though, with the electrical integration. So fostering gas integration, of course, is important to provide support. And I think that this is closer to other renewables, such as biomethane or green hydrogen, by using the infrastructure that we also have in the region. We know that we have idle capacity in the pipelines in many countries. Mostly we use the interconnection between Bolivia and Brazil and Argentina, but the connections between Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay are not so leveraged. Now, about the role of the GNL, we should analyze this at the level of the entirety of the region. But if we talk about the sub-region of the Southern Cone, natural gas is playing a major role, for example, in Brazil, to provide more flexibility to the mix. We have 3 plants there, and we included 2 more plants. I think last week we heard about the construction of another plant in Santa Catarina, and there are more projects forecast, and I think that they will be flexible drivers towards the electrical system. In Argentina, the dynamics have changed because there has been a change in the demand and supply for gas. And mainly in summer, we have seen a decrease in the demand because normally gas is used for heating. So it is not necessary to import that much. But in Argentina, there's this peak shaving need. There's a 6-month peak. In Chile, the case of natural gas, I think, is a bit more structural because of the characteristics of the demand. It is the main source of supply together with Argentina and sometimes of the year. We would perhaps see a broader expansion of LNG in Chile as more gas is available in Argentina and as we move towards other sources. But Chile still needs to substitute about 40% of its mix because it's carbon-based. So there's room for opportunity there. So the LNG market, I think, is younger than the natural gas market. So when we think about it that way, it is not as mature as other systems. There are emerging technologies that have a lower scale, that are more connected perhaps to transportation, and that we might be including. If we're talking about integration, we can talk about fuel generations, and I think that the drivers in the Southern Cone follow more the lines of what I was mentioning. But if we analyze the region, I think there is ample room to substitute liquids in Central America and the Caribbean that have a smaller demand. But I think that that's something for us to discuss later. I don't know if I missed any of the questions, Raul.
No, perfect. Thank you very much, Paula, for your response. And to make a summary of the conclusions of this panel, there is a coincidence and there is an agreement in the need to go forward with the gas integration, starting again with something that had been really advanced among like 10 years ago, but that was left along the way. And that's what Aladi was talking about, the political commitment, because maybe the political commitment is not strong enough. And that interrupted that growth of the integration that was happening at the times. And I think that then we have the thing of creating the rules and creating that market. And that is where we have the need for participation of Aladi or Olade to build it. Because as the Minister of Bolivia said, infrastructure requires pretty modest investments to create a market. So I think that there are really a lot of options and possibilities. I think that it will be a great advantage to have the gas sector in the country, and I think we hope that this can be continued and started really soon. Thank you, everyone who has participated in the panel, and I hope that we can continue to talk about these topics very soon. Thank you very much. Guillermo? Yes, thank you very much, Raúl. We'll now have Gabriela speak. Thank you, Guillermo and Raúl. Thank you for your moderation and the rest of our panelists for having joined us in this second roundtable about integration of gas. We would also like to thank everyone who is joining us on Zoom and our YouTube channels. Thank you for staying with us. And we would also like to invite you this afternoon at 2 at the time of Quito, Ecuador, to our roundtable on digitalization of companies of infrastructure and the benefits for the sector. And the second one, which will be about green renewal post-COVID-19. We expect you this afternoon. Thank you very much.